Hi, everybody. This is Jacinta Reed from Vintage Pasadena. I'm the Connections Pastor at the church, and I have the pleasure of introducing you to two of our church members here this evening. I've got Dr. Duane Alleman and Dr. Jeff Bjorck, and they are both psychologists who have lots of experience both in the academic world and also in practice. So if I could, I'm going to pass over and I'm going to let each of them tell you a little bit about themselves, maybe where you're from, where you live, how long have you been at Vintage?
Thanks, Jacinta. So my wife Sharon and I came to Vintage just this last April. So we're coming up on a full year and have really enjoyed the fellowship of the church. I was a licensed psychologist and professor at Fuller Seminary and the School of Psychology for 30 years. I actually retired in 2020 from Fuller, and I retired my license as a psychologist actually just this last November. But my work was generic when it came to clinical. So I worked with all ages and all people. So a little bit of everything. Yeah.
Thanks, Jeff. How about you, Duane?
I graduated from Fuller quite a few years ago, their School of Psychology with a PhD in clinical psychology, and been in Pasadena in private practice ever since, so about 35 years. Joined the fellowship at Vintage just 2 years ago, and my wife Linda and I have been very blessed to be there.
Oh, we're really blessed to have you. So, everyone, we've been asked by Pastor Ben to have a conversation tonight that hopefully some of you will find helpful in light of what we've all experienced this week with the fires that are still continuing to burn. But the hope is that there will be some comfort, maybe some practical advice that we can gain from this conversation as we all try to navigate this weird moment in our lives. Let's start with the big question, which is for those who have lost everything, who have experienced very, very personal losses through what we're going through. Would either of you have something that you would like to say to them to start with?
Well, I think obviously all of us that are observing this and close to people that are going through this understand only in a limited way how devastating it is to lose everything that you own in an instant. And it is heartbreaking, just empathically, but we can't really fully understand that particular trauma. We may have gone through other traumas. We've certainly seen hundreds of clients with various traumas. But this one is unique in that it's so dramatically shared by thousands of others at the same time and surrounded by people who are impacted by it as well, who have not lost their homes, including some whose homes did not burn to the ground, but everyone around them did. So it's a very profoundly disturbing, disorienting event. And whatever the reactions are that people are having, I don't want to say they're normal. You know, the trauma reaction to a trauma is a normal response to an abnormal event. And I think we could all, just even without a PhD, acknowledge what those reactions might be emotionally. And there's a whole range of them. And people are responding differently based on who they are, based on their history, based on their situation, based on their resources and support of their community and internal development. So there is no one right way to respond. It's a very difficult time for everybody. And I guess that's the first thing I want to say. Whatever you're going through, it may seem abnormal to you, but it's a normal response to an abnormal event.
First and foremost, if you are someone who has lost anything, you have our deepest sympathies. My wife and I were evacuated for a time, but we did not lose our home. And so if you are someone who did not lose your home, you also have our sympathy and our understanding that you may have feelings of guilt that you survived. That's also a normal response to a non-normal event. I believe also that if you had partial loss, or if this event reminded you of a previous loss or trauma, All of these are reasons to tell each of you to give yourself the space for care and to care for yourself. And many times we think that saying care for yourself is selfish. It's only selfish if you're doing it to the exclusion of caring for those around you as best you can at the same time. But if we do not care for ourselves at the same time, it's like bravely driving our car from Pasadena to Palm Springs with no gas and hoping we'll get there. So you do have our deepest sympathies.
You touched on some people might be feeling guilty. Could you describe just a general sweep of the different emotions that different people might be feeling? Because I know there is the different responses in terms of fight, flight, freezing, and those kind of responses, but what might they look like for different people?
Kaleidoscope. Duane said it well. It's different for each person. 5 people can experience the same event and have 5 different experiences. But obviously, anxiety, fear, sadness, grief, anger, and anger where it's hard to know where to place it is also there. Not just those emotions, but just a background fatigue. When you're running on elevated adrenaline and cortisol levels for a period of time, our bodies are not designed to do that for a long period of time. That's just to run away from the bear in the woods, not to have a bear living with you. And so those emotions are going to be there for each of us. And some of you might go, well, you know, right now I'm feeling okay. Is something wrong with me? And the answer, I think that Duane already, no, not necessarily at all. Some people may experience an event very differently. And so we don't want people to go looking for symptoms that they should have if they don't. That's
Right.
okay too. Maybe you'd add to that, Duane.
Well, just want to, normalize. I mean, there's also the shock element, right? The numbing early on after this. It's like, and then the regrets. It's like, oh, I didn't get this, I didn't get that. Those family photos, those beautiful pieces of artwork. Uh, how did I not think of that? There's can be some self-recrimination, um, uh, just irritability and difficulty concentrating and rumination and kind of replaying the events. That's all normal. And with time, those symptoms, those difficulties can become less and less acute, and ultimately somehow need to get integrated into this story that individuals don't want. None of us want traumas in our life, and once they happen, it changes everything. And somehow finding a way to, as Jeff said, care for ourselves in the midst of that, let others care for us. Uh, I've met with several people who lost their homes since that time, clients, friends. One of the responses was, what should I do? They're setting up a GoFundMe, and I don't feel right about that. I don't feel good about that. Or, my relative gave me $1,000. Should I share it with my brother who also lost his home? Or, it's kind of guilt even about receiving or difficulty with that. Some people are finding it just kind of hard to go on and hard to get kind of deal with the impact of this and may be frozen. And others, because of a different personality and sort of maybe upbringing circumstances, they're actually taking proactive steps and they're already figuring out how they're going to rebuild. So it's a wide range of experiences, and none of which are right or wrong. And it's important for people to have grace for themselves to be where they are. And as Jeff said, as much as possible, take care of themselves first, receive the love of their own first responders, right? Who are the first responders? It's family and its closest friends. Receive that love, receive that care. Let people do for us what they, for those who have lost what they've lost receive the gifts.
Yeah, I would just tag team on that by saying we as Christians believe that Christ has removed any requirements of a law for our righteousness, that the Lord has saved us and he's redeemed us. But I would gently remind each of us that in the New Testament, there's still a law that God tells us we have to follow. And it's in Galatians 6:2, where it says, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. And I would say that most people have a much easier time interpreting that regarding how they will help others, and a more difficult time interpreting receiving help. But the only way you can obey that directive from our Heavenly Father is, as Duane said, to care for others, but allow yourself to be cared for too. Yeah.
Do you have any advice for somebody who, regardless of whether they've lost everything or whether they're just experiencing shock, if a situation that we're having to deal with, life keeps going, and some people have had to go back to work and drop their kids at school and keep going with everything, but that doesn't mean everything's gone back to normal. And so if we need to ask one another to to tread lightly, what do you have any advice for that?
I would say that we live in a culture that encourages us to have facades. When someone says, how are you? You're supposed to say fine before you even know how you feel. We're supposed to follow some incredibly ridiculous rules like fake it till you make it. That's absurd. And what I would suggest is that we should be striving for authenticity at this point. And authenticity involves not spilling everything out of your life story to the person on the street, but being able to say to a person, I'm sorry, I just want you to know as we have this interaction that I'm not fully myself today. I've really been struck by the events of these recent days, and I'm not even thinking as clearly as I have. So I'd ask for your patience, and I'm going to do my best to be available to you, but I'm not up to par. And I just want to let you know that if you're not up to par, I'm wanting to support you too. And that type of a mutual statement can give both people permission to realize that neither one of them was fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
For the person who's having the feelings, say you're by yourself and your phone vibrates and you feel your body kind of tense up, what might you suggest in that situation?
So really what you're talking about is hyperarousal, which is a very common symptom of acute stress disorder, which is what thousands of people are suffering right now in our community. And after a month, it can be called PTSD, which we're more familiar with. And there's no clear delineation other than in a diagnostic manual. But hyperarousal, hypervigilance, fight or flight response, those are all very normal when there's a reminder or a memory or some cue that is linked to the original trauma. So when that happens, again, it's like normalize it. It's like nothing's abnormal about me, nothing's wrong with me that I'm having this reaction. I'm not losing my mind. It's usually not a panic attack. It may lead to that. It may feel like that. And that's okay too. And that would be something to get help for if that persisted. As the Christian church has learned, along with other religions, taking a deep breath, slowing down the breathing, focusing on the breathing as a way to break out of the cognitive space of rumination and just temporarily focus on something that's very concrete, very embodied, and potentially very calming. It's kind of the one thing in our fight or flight response that we can impact. We can begin to modulate in a way that we can't other things so automatically, like blood pressure, or our gastrointestinal reactivity or blood flow. So breathing is a good start. And with that, some people have learned breath prayers or bringing a verse to mind that has been helpful in, like Psalm 23. A lot of people are finding that helpful. Yea, though I go through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. My wife and I have been through various traumas in our lives, and not this one, but certainly finding that spiritual support, being grounded in God's imminent, immediate presence with us, surrounding us with love, and reminders of that through Scripture, maybe coupled with breathing, can be just a very helpful way to lower that reactivity and intensity in the moment.
The problem with these stimuli, like a phone going off that startles us, the problem is that if we don't know why we're startled, then we're startled at our startle.
Yep.
Imagine if you were just walking down the street and all of a sudden you had a severe pain in your left leg. You have no idea why you're having it. You would probably start to feel anxious. What's wrong with me, right? But what if, as you were walking down the street, and you you took one extra step and you had a pain, you remembered that yesterday you had pulled a muscle in your leg. Well, you'd have the same physical pain, but you wouldn't have that anxiety response in the same way, because I know what this is. And so right now, for all of us who've been subjected to these traumatic situations, to be able to take that deep breath and say, oh, I know what this is. I'll tell a very little quick story. Years ago, I was driving home, not going fast, coming up a quiet street, and someone started to dart out from the left. And as I looked at them to avoid them and honked, a dog ran in front of my car. I hit the brakes as hard as I could, but I couldn't stop, hit the dog. It rolled. I thought I'd killed it. It was very upsetting to me. I helped the dog. They took it away. The next day, I called the owners. I hope your dog's okay. Oh, yeah, the dog's fine. How many broken bones? None. That dog had bashed in my bumper on my truck and had no broken bone. Can I see the dog? Yes. I went over, the dog comes out wagging its tail, and I pet the dog, and everything is fine, right? So then when I drive past that exact spot the next night, I shouldn't have any response at all, should I? Wrong.
Right.
Traumatic events are neurologically encoded in places in our brain that usually are taking a nap.
Yeah.
And so they are so strongly encoded that we can have that severe reaction for a period of time.
Yeah.
And what I would do as I drove past that spot for weeks is that I would say, I know what this is, and I know it will pass. And that didn't make it go away magically, but it helped me be good to myself and say, it's okay that my startle response is a little bit higher. I know what this is.
Yes.
And more importantly, God is with me in the midst of this.
Yeah.
One of the emotions we're talking about, I sometimes think it's an elephant in the room. And the emotion we're not supposed to talk about is anger, because when it comes to a fire, who are we angry at? And there have typically been two responses in Christian circles. The first is, you're not allowed to be angry or express any anger towards God, because that's evil. Just smile and keep going. The other response is, go ahead, be angry at God, scream at God, swear at God, punch God in the face. God is so big, he can take it. I would like to say that neither of those responses is helpful. And I have a third suggestion. Because you see, consider a little boy whose parents say he has to go to a new school. And when he comes home, not having wanted to go to that school, walks through the front door and has broken glasses and a bloody nose and says, I told you I didn't want to go to that school. I'm so mad at you. Runs upstairs and slams his door. On which side of the door are his parents now? The people he needs the most. Being angry at God can be like slamming a door in God's face, but we don't have to do that. And the reason we don't have to is because God is angry at evil too. And so we can be angry together with God, arm in arm, next to God, looking out at the evil. God is grieving over this city in mysterious ways, like Pastor Ben said this week, that we cannot understand. He is both over all of this, and yet he also lets free will and accidents happen. And that is a mystery. But make no mistake, God is grieving over this city, and he's angry at the evil too. And so you can bring your anger to God in the form of a lament that keeps God closer to you. You can be that little boy who comes home and says, I told you I didn't want to go to that school, and now I have a bloody nose, but can I tell you what a bad day I had? And the parents say, of course, and you climb up into those parents' laps, and as you tell the story with tears coming down your face, you notice that the top of your head is getting wet because they're crying too. We can be mad and angry at this evil thing that's happened together with God as he continues to be the ally that we can look to for care. Rather than just trying to pretend that there's no anger. Of course there is. I don't believe God ever asks us to thank him for the evil things in and of themselves. Those things weren't his intention. I never thank God for death or cancer or fires or any of those things. I do thank him in them, that hopefully he will work all those things together for good. But I just want to give people permission to lament. But you can do that without slamming the door on the God who you really need right now more than ever.
And that's I think, a very important follow-up from my suggestion of scripture. Some people may find that comforting. Others may have their anger at God for this, or doubts that God is there for them, get in the way of being able to experience that as a helpful resource. So thank you for that.
Any advice for those of us who might encounter somebody who has strong opinions? Ben touched on this at church on Sunday, encouraging us to hold our theological explanations and hold them to ourselves for now. What might you suggest if somebody who's lost something or has gone through this hard time is receiving some unsolicited advice or explanation? Do you have any advice for that, Duane?
Oh, simply kind of be gracious. Thank you very much, and kind of move on. It's like people generally are well intentioned. Generally, they want to be helpful in some way, and one of the ways they try to do that is to fix it, put a band-aid on it, uh, give advice. I like what Pastor Ben said about, it's like the bigger the trauma, the less words there are.
Yes.
People need touch. People need uh, to be listened to. People need presence for those that matter to them. But they don't need fixes unless they ask, and unless they're sincerely wanting to solicit advice. And so if it's received and it's really not wanted, or if it's just annoying, it's like, be gracious, smile and say thank you, and then kind of move on. Or if there's someone closer to you, you can be honest and let them know, that's not really that helpful. Here's what I do need. Here's what would be helpful.
That's perfect, Duane. Because I think back to our culture also expects us to know all the answers. So if you don't know how to help a person, you're supposed to guess. Well, here's a novel concept. If you've got a friend who's hurting and you don't know how to help them, ask, how could I help? And imagine this. Imagine if they say, I really don't know. Then isn't it a good thing you didn't guess if they don't know? But just expressing your availability to help. What might be helpful right now for you? Is there anything that I could do? And that may be, I'd like some alone time. Okay, sure. But now you're actually having an idea of what they're asking. And Duane, that's exactly what you said. So I couldn't agree more.
There's the time when people say, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's allowed.
Yeah.
And instead of saying, how could I help if you feel this person will hear that as an assignment, and some people do, to say, is there anything right now that I might do to be helpful? Because then they can simply say, no, not right now.
Yeah.
So,
It's like releasing the other person, showing concern, and then like, you're not on the hook for anything. Thank you. Children, we haven't spoken about children yet, and how they might be experiencing what's happening around them.
well, I think parents can be, it depends on the age, of course, right? The younger the child, the more we protect them from reality. If they've lost their home, there's no way to protect them from that reality. If they were, woken up in the middle of the night and evacuated. I think as much as possible, maintaining the normal rhythms of their life is critical. Once their schools are open, back to school. If they have close friends that they like to hang out with, get together with their friends. And of course, surround them with a lot of uh, loving time and support with parents and as a family and with other families that they're close to.
I would agree. And I think a word would simply be structure. The more structure that a child has, the better they are able to function within that structured environment. And in a situation like this, so much structure has been eliminated that to try to have that normalcy. So sleep times, it's time for bed now. School times, meal times, as much as is possible. And for some folks, that's just not going to be possible. A single parent who is also trying to figure out how to work while being at a shelter, some of these things are just not possible. And so that is where we embrace our limits and ask for God's help, ask for other people's help, and realize that there aren't simple answers, and realize that even though we'd like to fix and protect children from everything, we can't, no matter how many Disney movies we've seen. Keep in mind that when Finding Nemo's father said, "I promise nothing bad will ever happen to you," his mother had just been eaten. Sometimes we parents want to be super parents to our children, and that's too hard on us. Part of the structure that you want to give your children is to have them see you're trying to have some structure too, like bedtimes and sleep and things of that nature.
Just model self-care, right?
And I would also take their lead, at least at first, especially younger kids, and see what type of questions they ask, rather than thinking, it's time to have a sit down with my 6-year-old and debrief on all the things that have happened here. We sometimes adultify those children, and they're not at that level yet. So with a child, you can say, wondering if you want to ask mommy any questions about what's going on lately and how are you feeling? And give them a space. And with those questions, you can then begin to get a sense of what are they experiencing? How much are they aware of? What are their concerns? And that's a start.
Yeah.
Right.
What do you think about the children seeing you cry? If you have young children and you're really distressed, what happens if there's big emotions? Maybe even mom and dad are having a hard time getting along with each other. The tension is high in the household. How can we minimize the impact or the negative impacts for the child?
Again, it depends on the age of the child. I'd say the older they are, the more they can uh, experience a parent as crying and be able to cognitively understand it, to be able to even talk about it. I think in some ways it can be a healthy modeling. It's like crying is okay. It's
Right.
not something we have to hide in the closet and do. And but I think if a child seems distressed by our crying, at that point, we give them reassurance. Honey, this is a hard time for us. We lost our house, but we're going to be okay. I think that kids do need reassurance. They do need a sense of protection and hope. And even if the parents don't totally feel it at that point, I think offering that gift to your children, again, depending on their ages, is very helpful.
I think, again, our culture puts so many superhuman expectations on us. One of them is that the only acceptable way for an adult to cry is if they're dysfunctional and infantile, and I can prove it. You have to break down and cry like a baby. Well, Jesus of Nazareth stood at the tomb of Lazarus, functioned correctly, and cried like an adult. And to see an adult cry, if you've never seen an adult cry, is a surprising event. But to see an adult cry from time to time, and as Duane said, to say, mommy's sad, daddy's sad right now, and we assume you're sad too. We're going to be okay. But God gave us tears to help us when we're sad. You try to cork that up, it's just going to blow somewhere else.
Yeah, actually, a really interesting sidelight here is that tears have high concentrations of cortisol in them. So when we release tears, God actually designed it as a cathartic event, as some way for us to heal and to release tension.
Speaking to us as the church who are hoping to support one another as best we can, I would think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that there are going to be some pockets of people who need some extra concern at this time. I'm thinking of people who are caregivers already, or people who are, working through chronic illnesses or already had other things going on in their lives. Can you add to that list for me? Just who do you think we should be keeping an extra eye out for at this time?
Well, maybe people who are living alone,
Yes.
that don't have family that they're living with. There's a lot of comfort in community. And like I said, first responders are family. Well, if someone doesn't have family around, they're all on the East Coast, or they're alienated from their family, or their family's all, they're gone and they're on their own. I think those people need the community of faith more than ever, for people to be aware of them and providing them with love and care and support where possible, to know that that is a vulnerable group.
I would add the elderly, simply because as our bodies age, we require more time to recuperate. It's much easier to get dehydrated. It's much easier to get fatigued. It's much easier to catch a serious illness. And oftentimes the elderly do experience some isolation. Add to that people who don't have ready transportation. So that even if they are a family, but they're stuck at one location and it's hard to get to places. And so I think one of the things the church can do is to try to figure out, can we have more community type events, like obviously on Sunday as a key example of that, but events where if there can be signups for transport, that's one thing. Also, phone trees of lists of folks, and I know the staff has already been doing a great job with this, but the staff need help. And so things like prayer chains or phone trees where people can know we have people keeping in touch with various people to help people still feel connected. And then we haven't mentioned those who have cognitive or mental issues, whether there's neurodivergence or limited cognitive capacity or chronic or severe mental illness. Folks like that hopefully already have some structures around them, but they will potentially need more support as well. And I guess I would just think this might be a good point to say, you can have the best church in the world with the most fantastic staff and the most incredible congregation. And in a situation like this, we are not going to be able to do it all well. People are going to fall through the cracks at various times. And the enemy would just love to tell us that we are failing if we don't catch every single thing along the way. If we aren't in two places at once, if we're supposed to be with one child and the other child on the same day, whichever one we go to, we feel guilty that we didn't go to the other because we're supposed to be able to be in two locations. That's God's job. And so we need to realize that part of our adjusting to this is continually grieving that it's not going to be perfect. We're going to be okay, but we're not going to be people who have not experienced a trauma that's collectively impacted thousands of people.
Yeah.
I've been really interested in all the people that are reaching out from faraway places, even to me, and saying, "Are you okay? What? Have you been affected by the fires?" And in my case, we have not lost our home, and I'm grateful for that. But I'm aware that there's just so much concern and empathy and compassion. And what's been encouraging are people in my orbit who are taking action. And it's like these various opportunities have emerged or been initiated to be of help because I think the people who have not lost their homes also do feel some, often, depending on kind of where they are in their life, but often a need to do something, even if it's small. And that's for the offering on Sunday, for those who have lost their homes, those affected by the fires, was helpful. Or I used to be in a small group, and the people that hosted it lost their homes. So there was a GoFundMe page, and we could do that. Or family members started setting up, asking, do you know anyone that's lost their homes? We want to do gift baskets for them. And what are their sizes? And so, as a large family group across the country, we were all kind of leaning into that. These are just small things, but corporately, cumulatively, they can make a difference. And sometimes it's having someone over our house for a meal that's not able to have a kitchen or cook in their own home, and we're planning on that.
And I think, Jacinta, your question about what about folks who feel wobbly and their house is fine and everything's fine and they weren't evacuated and they were 3 miles from even a warning zone and weren't at any appreciable risk and are finding themselves wobbly and startle response and anxious and then on top of that, maybe finding themselves embarrassed and ashamed that they're not feeling fine.
Mm.
I would want to invite all the people in that group to realize that it's not simply actual events that can truly stress us out. It's the awareness of what might have happened that can also stress us out. It's the awareness of what might still happen that can also stress us out. It's the awareness of this situation reminding me, as Duane said earlier, of situations in the past that I haven't really quite wrapped up in my own self yet. And so that's bubbling back up. Those people should not feel embarrassed or ashamed to feel wobbly. I remember reading a devotional many years ago about a grandmother who was at a prayer meeting, and she offered a prayer, and it was such a beautiful picture. She said, "And Lord, support us on every leaning side." And I just got the picture of a four-walled structure where every wall is leaning in and they're all holding each other up, because without them, every one of them could fall. And that's not just the people for whom the house is gone. That's the people who go, I could have lost my house. Do I need to leave Southern California? Do I need to move? Where am I going to move? What should I, am I moving? Is that bad of me? Well, wait, Duane said, if somebody gives me money, should I split it with somebody else I know? All of those types of questions. And we need to support each other in those situations. But for those who have not had any obvious objective damage from this event, if you're feeling wobbly, that's normal and you're human too. And it's okay to ask for support for that as well. Because that's going to help you be more supportive to others.
What we want to say to the church right now is that we want to hear from you. If you're having need, if you're experiencing anything like that, there's no criteria that you have to meet in order to get some help at this time. But what is the baseline right now do you think everyone should be thinking about? Jeff, earlier you mentioned staying hydrated. What would you say are the baseline things that we can think about hitting as a bare minimum at the moment to look after ourselves?
Well, one of the first things and foundations for health, mental and physical, is sleep.
Amen.
So really focusing on rhythms, because the adrenaline's high, extremely high right now. And so slowing down in the evening, keeping the lights low towards bedtime, not engaging in stimulating activities or thoughts or emails or work, but kind of winding down for sleep as much as possible, and really managing circadian rhythms so that you're going to bed at the same time, you're waking up at the same time, which may be very hard when you're not in your own home, right? And you don't have the blackout blinds or what, you're in a bed that's not comfortable. It's a very difficult thing, but sleep is number one for well-being. And then I hope everybody that's lost their homes are not just jumping right back into every activity they've had and responsibility. People need a break from their responsibilities, even from work for a while if they can get that time off, uh, and um, and yet being out in nature and getting some movement and exercise actually helps with sleep. It helps with physical well-being. It helps with managing stress. So I'd say clearly exercise is another one. And yeah, some people might be tempted to drink more than usual or get high or just some other escapism uh, that in the long run and even in the short run is going to interfere with the healing process. So healthy habits and more than maybe usual, connecting with people that care. It's like there's power, there's healing in relationship. We all need that. We need our family community, and if we don't have that, we don't need our inner circle of friends, that are the family we've chosen for ourselves, and we need our faith community. So I think those are some of the foundations of getting through this successfully.
I would add about sleep, totally agreeing with what Duane said. Sleep is actually the key to spiritual formation. And that might sound bizarre, but all you have to do is go to Galatians 5:22, read the fruits of the Spirit, and I challenge you to find one of them that is not significantly hindered by fatigue.
Yeah.
And so sleep is the daily surrender to say, I am not God, you are God. Our God never sleeps. We need to. So amen to that.
I like that.
A practical suggestion that I would also make, and this does have research to back it up, is to consider, especially if you're a worrier, consider taking 10 minutes, 15 max, but 10 minutes, getting out a piece of paper and a pen, and at least an hour and a half before bed, ideally maybe 2 hours before bed, take out that pencil and paper and worry as hard as you can and as fast as you can. Write down every worry you can possibly think of. Don't write a single potential solution. You are dumping your buffer of the worries. And as a spiritual exercise, especially if you have a shredder, when the timer goes off, you're in the middle of your sentence, you stop. And by the way, if you run out of worries before the 10 minutes is up, praise God. But especially right now, you probably won't. But at the end of that 10 minutes, you take that piece of paper, you walk over to the shredder or the trash or whatever, and you say, Dear Heavenly Father, I'm casting my cares on you. These are yours. And what the research shows is that doing that will then make it much more likely that when you shut the lights off and go to sleep, try to go to sleep, all those worries don't all of a sudden come jumping out and inhibit you from beginning to fall asleep. It's not a perfect magic trick, but it really is very helpful. And so consider, especially even before we've had all these events, for anyone who has insomnia, that can be a helpful thing too. But to think about that as a pragmatic way of casting your cares on him because he cares for you.
I like that, Jeff. And it's not necessarily just for people who are writers.
Oh, no.
For some people, journaling, something they naturally do. For others, like myself, I resist it.
Me too.
But there are those situations where expressive writing, making tangible, putting into words feelings and thoughts that we might be ruminating about, can be a container for them. Can, even in the brain, it's like it's taking the neocortex and these descending fibers to the limbic system, the emotional brain. They are inhibitory, and it's a way of putting into words what we're feeling that can actually then give shape and definition to our emotions and help us to put them in place, put them in a place where they can be more at rest.
The last question I had was, let's say a few weeks are going to go by, somebody's still not feeling right. They're not feeling okay. When do we know that actually I need to speak to a professional or I need to reach out for another level of help?
Well, for some people, it might be right away.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some people might feel so overwhelmed, just they're getting support from others or they're not, but they just feel like I need more. And so looking for professional help at that point would make a lot of sense. There are others where they might need to reach out for help because they're not functioning and it's becoming prolonged, right? It's not just for a day or two or a week, but they can't focus at work. They are still in shock and numb and maybe becoming dysfunctional through over drinking or in some other way. So those would be some cues and signs for, I think, maybe the majority of people. So many of these feelings we've talked about are so normal. It may be just about how long do they last? After weeks and or a month or two, am I still feeling like I did at the beginning? Or am I seeing progress? Am I feeling like I'm healing? And these problems are still there emotionally, but they're less acute. They're less severe. I'm on the healing journey. But those that get stuck, those that feel overwhelmed or aren't able to function well, or simply just think they need an additional person that can listen compassionately and with kindness and understanding and help them through the journey beyond what their immediate family and family members and friends can do.
In addition, I think back to our beloved culture, our culture basically gives us the message that you go to a mental health professional when you're failing. When you're failing to be able to do what a normal human being should do. I would suggest that that's one reason to go to a mental health professional, but it's not the only reason. I give this metaphor. I don't think most of us right today need $5 million. We don't need it. But I bet if given some time to think about it, we could make very good use of those resources. Well, even if you don't need to talk to somebody, you could probably make very good use of those resources to strengthen you up, to think about them, even as coaching to help you optimize your performance. Not just as though the only way I can get help is if I feel like I'm failing, and so then I should also feel badly about myself. But no, people get a trainer at the gym, not simply if they're completely out of shape. Some people who go to a trainer are in great shape. They want to be in better shape. And so you don't have to wait. It's not a sign of failing to say, I need to talk to somebody. And by the way, maybe you want to talk to somebody else as a way of caring for the people in your immediate circle who you don't want to overburden as well. And so that can be a reason to do that as well. So, but there's not a magic day or week when, okay, now you've passed a barrier or a bar. But I would just say, it's not also just a negative thing. It can actually be a positive thing.
Well said, Jeff.
Is there anything else you'd like to add, Duane, to what's already been said this evening?
Only that this has been an unbelievably difficult journey for so many, and it is really impacting our whole community. The love and care that I hear for people who have lost their homes is really quite encouraging. And I just would encourage people who have lost their homes, who are suffering in any other way because of this trauma and tragedy, to be willing to receive help and to be willing to ask for help and to accept that this is an unusual time and our our normal patterns of going about life have been profoundly disrupted, and it's time to let other people care for us and to care for ourselves in an even more intentional and proactive way.
Thank you. And over to you, Jeff. Any closing thoughts?
Well, before I suggested that you take 10 minutes and worry as hard as you can, much earlier I suggested that you spend time in lament, crying out and complaining to God and letting him know what a bad day you've had. There is one more thing to do. And if you only do this, it's like a Band-Aid on a gangrenous sore. But if you don't do it, you're missing a great opportunity. And that is, maybe right before you go to bed, turn on your phone or your laptop, have a little file somewhere, name it thank you, and spend 3 minutes. And just see if you can write down 1 or 2 or 3 things that you are actually thankful for to God that have happened this day. Because gratitude, research has shown over and over, raises endorphins, increases mood, helps us feel better. And it's basically kind of like saying, before you go to bed every night, count your money and see that you're not broke, and see that God has blessed you with things today. And if we don't count them, we miss them. I think our typical MO is that we step over our answered prayer requests like dirty laundry on the way to our next request. Instead of picking them up, putting them on the mantle and saying, Jehovah Ebenezer, thus far the Lord has helped us. And that is not, again, not in the absence of saying, and I'm also upset, and I'm also angry, and I'm also hurt, and this is how I'm hurting. But we can do both of those. And to be able to identify even 1 or 2, and you may not be able to do that right now. You might not be able to do it for a week, but think about doing it when you can, and spend 3 minutes, write 2 sentences. And then if you look back at that even a week later and realize, wait a minute, in the midst of this darkness and evil and hurt, there have been flickers of light and signposts that God is still with us. And that gratitude to God can really fuel your strengthening as we all try to heal together and support each other.
That's right. Well, thank you both very much for your time this evening. Everybody who's watching, we send you all our best wishes. Our prayers are with all of you who are in this time with us. Thank you for everything, and we will hopefully be seeing you soon.